Lena stood in the middle of the dimly lit living room, her fingers gently tracing the edge of the old, cracked mantelpiece. The house, a charming relic salvaged from a forgotten era, was rich with stories, whispering through the creaks and groans of its aging structure. Still, something made her uneasy. Even at midnight, when they had turned off every light and closed every curtain, shadows lingered in corners like waiting apparitions. As the couple settled in for the night, they were struck by an inexplicable sensation, a presence that seemed to thrum beneath the surface of their new home. It began with small clues, a rhythmic tapping echoing softly from the hallway as if a child were playing a game of hide-and-seek, dangerously close, yet never revealing itself. Lena brushed it off, but the subtle tick-tock of the radiator, which had once seemed innocuous, now crouched menacingly at the edges of her perception. The air in the room hung thick, almost too heavy to breathe, as the temperature inexplicably dipped, causing her breath to fog and swirl in the otherwise warm evening air. Then there was the flicker of the dim overhead light, the way it would falter ever so slightly before restoring illumination. It flickered a second time, painting menacing shadows that twisted and elongated across the walls, distorting the familiar shapes of their furniture into grotesque, unsuspecting forms. Returning from the kitchen, Tom held a steaming mug of tea, but the warmth radiating from it felt inadequate, as a cold seeped into the room like a creeping fog. He paused mid-step, squinting at the edges of the room, where the shadows seemed especially dark. "Did you leave the window open?" he asked, his voice taut with something he couldn't name. "No," Lena replied, her eyes darting to the dust-covered window panes, which had inexplicably gathered small, childlike handprints. The prints were stark against the grime, like echoes of tiny fingers that had pressed against the glass, waiting for the chance to be let inside. "Maybe it's just an old house thing," she suggested, but as the words left her lips, something cold brushed against her ankle. She glanced down, but nothing was there. They decided to sleep with the bedroom door locked, the comforting weight of their decision chasing away the unsettling thoughts. But as Lena lay beside Tom, tossing and turning, she swore she heard a soft, melodic whisper, calling her name from beyond the door. Each syllable sounded like a plea, slithering between the low rustle of the trees outside, coaxing her to listen closer. In an act of bravado, Lena slipped from the warm cocoon of her blankets and padded silently across the floor, her bare feet cool against the aged wood. The hallway stretched out before her, lit only by the pulsing glow of the flickering light bulb, which trembled ominously above her head. The whisper intensified as she reached the edge of the dim hallway. Her heart raced as she realized the melody was constant, insistent, and unyielding, growing louder the closer she ventured. Suddenly, she stopped. The air thickened and a dreadful shiver climbed her spine as she looked ahead. Her blood ran cold as she spotted a figure standing in the far darkness, a small girl, perhaps 5 years old, draped in a threadbare nightgown, her hair long and unkempt. The girl lifted a fragile finger, pointing directly at the corner of the hallway where the shadows coiled like thick tendrils. "Help," she whispered, the sound soft, yet seeping with urgency. "It never stops." The final realization slammed into Lena like an avalanche. The house was never truly dark because it hoarded the flickering light from 1,000 shadows, each holding on to pieces of those who had come before her. With a shuddering breath, she turned and ran, her feet pounding against the floor as the whispers grew furious in her ears, echoing the desperate likes of their own trapped souls. Burrowing back into bed, she curled against Tom, who opened his eyes with concern. "What's wrong?" "We need to leave this house," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It wants us." The following day they packed hurriedly, casting fearful glances over their shoulders as the shadows seemed to shift and yawn around them, reluctant to let their new inhabitants go. As they stepped outside into the stark daylight, Lena turned to glance back one last time. Through the dust-covered window, she swore she saw the small figure stare back at her, the vacant gaze of the girl still pleading in silence, trapped within the never-ending twilight of their home. And in that moment, Lena understood. The whispers would continue, the shadows would never fully recede, and the echoes of a house too alive would linger long after they had fled, enshrouded in a dimness that held its own secrets.